Is the Mormon Church a cult? Steve Hassan is a well-respected cult expert and a mental health counselor. His book, Combating Cult Mind Control, is one of the most important on the topic. I will be using Hassan's BITE model to determine if Mormonism is a cult. The B stands for behavior control, the I stands for information control, the T stands for thought control, and the E stands for emotional control. Behavior control. There are 18 main ways a cult can control behavior. Number 1 is regulate the individual's physical reality. Now I think of this as a commune, people living in a communal setting, going out to a ranch like Osho did in Oregon, or joining the Scientology Sea Org organization, where they live in dorms and their physical reality is really controlled. The Moonies do this. Other cults do this. The Mormons don't really do this. The people live in their own communities, and their physical reality is not regulated to this extent. Number 2, dictate where, how, and with whom the member lives and associates with or isolates. Now again, the Mormons are living in their own communities around potentially other non-Mormons. However, in some cities in Utah and other places, it could be 80 to 90% Mormon. But basically, their physical reality is not controlled in this manner, and they live in their community. So I would say no to this one. Number 3 is control when, how, and with whom the member has sex. Now, this is a big thing in Mormonism, and I did a whole video called Mormonism's Obsession with Sex that goes through all the when, how, and with whom. Homosexuals can't have sex, the youth can't have sex, only married people can have sex, and there's all kinds of restrictions under Mormonism. So you can watch that video, which goes into detail. Anything that's considered aberrant has to be confessed to a bishop. Number 4 is control types of clothing and hairstyles. Now, this is also a big thing in Mormonism. For example, garments that you get in the temple. These are the kind of the long underwear that you have to wear 24/7. Missionaries have a certain dress code and hair code. There's weird kinds of clothing that you have to wear in the temple. And just in general, when you go to church or to Mormon functions or meetings, there's definitely a look and a style. It's a clean cut. So this is a yes for Mormons. Number 5, regulate diet, food, and drink, hunger, and or fasting. Now, this is also a big thing in Mormonism. They do a 24-hour fast once a month. No beer, wine, or alcohol is allowed. No coffee is allowed. No caffeinated tea is allowed. Herbal tea, I think, is okay. There's even other stuff in their scriptures that they don't even follow, like having meat in times of famine. So, yes, this is also a big thing for Mormonism. Number 6, manipulation and deprivation of sleep. Some cults will do this when they're trying to indoctrinate you and control your mind. Mormons don't really do this. The only example I could think of it would be some of the males in the church that have heavy church callings and they work full-time and they're supposed to spend time with their family. They might get a little bit sleep deprived, but this really doesn't happen in the Mormon Church. Number 7 is financial exploitation, manipulation, or dependence. Now, I put a yes down on this one. They have tithing, which is 10% of your income, whether you're poor, old, or unable to even buy food for your children. Tithing is still number 1 priority as far as your financial obligations to the church. And that money goes into a non-transparent corporation, which is the church, and members don't know where the money goes. They're not audited. They don't release any reports. So I'm going to say yes for financial exploitation. Number 8, restrict leisure, entertainment, and vacation time. Now, Mormons do have a very busy lifestyle, and they have a lot of Mormon meetings and functions that they have to go to, but they still have leisure time. They still watch a lot of TV. They get on the internet, play games. They still go on vacations, maybe not as much as some people because there are a lot of requirements in the lifestyle of Mormonism, but I'm going to say no on this one. Number 9, major time spent with group indoctrination and rituals and or self-indoctrination. They are required to go to 3 hours of church every Sunday. There is temple work every month or a couple times a month. There's lots of meetings and functions, so there's plenty of time that they have to indoctrinate them. Plenty of meetings. So I'm going to say yes. Number 10, permission required for major decisions. Now, major decisions are just built into the structure of Mormonism. There is all kinds of milestones in the young men's program and the young women's program, all kinds of rules and expectations for dating. Young men at age 18 are required to go on a mission for 2 years, and women can go too as well if they want. College is usually expected in Mormonism as they value education, and then getting married in the temple and being active members of the church. So yes, major decisions are all laid out for you. Number 11, reporting thoughts, feelings, and activities of yourself and others to superiors. Now, in Mormonism, this is basically just reporting on yourself, and there is a litany of possible sins that you can commit. You will definitely find yourself in front of a bishop confessing your sins. So this is a definite yes. Number 12, rewards and punishments used to modify behaviors, both positive and negative. Now, the rewards are just built into the structure of the Mormon Church, and they are according to their beliefs. So, for instance, being married in the temple for time and eternity is a reward, but you have to be worthy and can't commit any of the sins of Mormonism. Also, your salvation in the highest kingdom of glory, which they call the celestial kingdom. You have to follow all the rules of Mormonism and not commit any sins, or your salvation will be taken away from you. Number 13, discourage individualism and encourage groupthink. The Mormons definitely do this. They are encouraged to look and act the same. They run a program of conformity, and it's one of my biggest complaints and concerns with the church is they're not allowing people to be individuals. Number 14, impose rigid rules and regulations. There are a ton of rules and regulations in the Mormon Church. Maybe the only religions that have more are the Amish and the Scientologists. Number 15, instill dependency and obedience. This is a definite yes. Members are definitely encouraged to obey the leaders, and it's a very top-down approach. It's not democratic. And you're dependent on them for your salvation because they have the priesthood. Number 16, threaten harm to family and friends. Now, I guess it depends on how you define harm. If it's physical harm, they don't really do that. If it's emotional harm and somebody leaves the church, I can see that emotional harm to the person who leaves as they're kind of shunned. But physical harm to family and friends, no. Number 17, force an individual to rape or be raped. Now, this is pretty gross and obscene, but I guess it does happen in some cults. This does not happen in Mormonism. Number 18, encourage and engage in corporal, aka physical punishment. The Mormon Church really doesn't do this. They don't motivate through violence. So for behavior control, I have 11 yes responses and 7 no responses. Now moving on to the I in the BITE model. The I stands for information control. There are 19 main ways a cult can control information. Deception, number 1, deliberately withhold information. Now, the Mormon Church has been doing this ever since the church began. They control the archives, they write the history, and they leave out a lot of stuff. Deception, number 2, distort information to make it more acceptable. As you start studying Mormon history, and especially when Mormons are writing it, you definitely start to see a lot of distortion. Deception, number 3, systematically lie to the cult member. Yes, definitely. This has been going on ever since the church was established by Joseph Smith. He lied about polygamy to people inside the church and outside the church and to his own wife. The church has largely lied about this up until the current day. There is also lies about the translation process of the Book of Mormon, how it was done. There's been lies and continue to be lies about the historicity of the Book of Mormon, the historicity of the Book of Abraham and its translation process. So there's so many lies. Number 4, minimize or discourage access to non-cult sources of information, including internet, TV, radio, books, articles, newspapers, magazines, and other media. Yes, they definitely do this. They definitely discourage it as anti-Mormon and unreliable. Number 5, minimize or discourage access to non-cult sources of information, including critical information. Yes, they definitely discourage it as anti-Mormon and unreliable. Things from Gerald and Sandra Tanner, Dialogue, A Journal of Mormon Thought, Sunstone Magazine, books from Signature Publisher, all these things are anti-Mormon and unreliable. Minimize or discourage access to non-cult sources of information, including number 6, former members. Yes, you cannot rely on former members as a reliable source of information because they are dark and sinful and have lost the spirit. So yeah, that's the main way that they think of former members. Minimize or discourage access to non-cult sources of information, including number 7, keep members busy so they don't have time to think and investigate. Yes, Mormons are very busy with work and with church work and with their families. They have a lot of kids, so they are very busy, and it does take a lot of time to do a deep dive into this information and to read enough books and articles and stuff on the internet to really get down to the bottom of it. So yeah, it does take a lot of time, and the members are very busy, so this is a yes. Minimize or discourage access to non-cult sources of information, including number 8, control through cell phone with texting, calls, internet tracking. Now with this, I kind of think of Scientology and the Sea Org. They're not allowed to make phone calls or to text or even go on the internet. They have these very strict filters that filter out anything anti-Scientology. The Mormons don't really do this. They can get on the internet at any time that they want, but they are very controlled in their minds. But for this one is a no. Compartmentalize information into outsider versus insider doctrines. Number 9, ensure that information is not freely accessible. They do this in a few different ways. They control the church archives and historical information really closely, and they only release things as they see fit. There's also information about the temple that is not accessible to a person studying Mormonism, an investigator. However, they can go on YouTube, and people like New Name Noah have recorded everything. So I would say this is a yes. Compartmentalize information into outsider versus insider doctrines. Number 10, control information at different levels and missions within the group. Yeah, so when you're first investigating Mormonism, they're going to give you the milk before they give you the meat, they say. So a lot of the simple stuff, and then as you become a Mormon year after year, you'll get more into the deep doctrines, so to speak. Eventually you'll be able to go to the temple and get that information. That information is definitely controlled until you get there, because it's sacred but not secret, but really it is secret. So yeah, and the archives again, so this is a yes. Compartmentalize information into outsider versus insider doctrines. Number 11, allow only leadership to decide who needs to know what and when. Yes, this is a very top-down church, a very authoritarian church. So everybody looks to the leaders for information, and the information comes from the leaders, and the teachings and the doctrines come from the leaders. So they look at the modern-day prophet as the be-all and end-all, even if they contradict former prophets. They control the archives, they control the history, they control the church manuals, so they definitely control the church. Okay, encourage spying on other members. Number 12, impose a buddy system to monitor and control the member. Now, when you are on an LDS mission, you do have a buddy system. You're never allowed to be away from your companion. So that is a buddy system, but that does not involve the entire church. That's just for 2 years. There really isn't a buddy system outside of the mission. Although when you're at church schools and stuff, you're going to be around a lot of Mormons, but I would say no. Encourage spying on other members. 13, report deviant thoughts, feelings, and actions to leadership. This might happen a little bit, but basically you're kind of self-judging and self-reflecting to report all of your own deviant thoughts, feelings, and actions. There's really not spying. Encourage spying on other members. Number 14, ensure that individual behavior is monitored by the group. They don't really do this. Spying is not a big thing in the Mormon Church that I know about. There may be some of this at higher levels and for certain assets or targets that are causing trouble for the church. But in general, no. Number 15, extensive use of cult-generated information and propaganda, including newsletters, magazines, journals, audio tapes, videotapes, YouTube, movies, and other media. Yes, they definitely do all of this stuff, and I look at it as definitely being propaganda. It's not accurate, so yes. Extensive use of cult-generated information and propaganda, including, number 16, misquoting statements or using them out of context from non-cult sources. Yes, they do this from time to time in Mormon history. Mormon history really is done pretty poorly, especially the early stuff. So, yeah, they do this. Unethical use of confession. Number 17, information about sins used to disrupt and or dissolve identity boundaries. Yeah, so there's so many sins and so many confessions that the guilt and shame just builds up, and you create this false identity of being a bad person, that you're not good enough. So your identity becomes so involved in this guilt and shame. Unethical use of confession. Number 18, withholding, forgiveness, or absolution. So yeah, you commit a sin, there is a process of repentance, there's all these steps you have to go through, and you have to confess this to a priesthood leader, and they decide if you've gone through the steps appropriately. I think a lot of people just lie to get through this stuff. But yeah, the priesthood leader can withhold the forgiveness or absolution, and this all has to be done with church authority, so yes. Unethical use of confession. Number 19, manipulation of memory and possible false memories. Okay, I guess you could do this in a cult. You'd have to have a process for it. I did not see this in Mormonism, so I'm going to say no. So for information control, I had 14 yes responses and 5 no responses. So yeah, this is a very big area for the church. They control information very tightly, and that does not look very good. 14 yes and 5 no. Okay, let's go to the T in the BITE model, thought control. There are 18 main ways a cult can control your thoughts. Okay, first item in thought control. Require members to internalize the group's doctrine as truth. Number 1, adopting the group's map of reality as reality. And Mormons definitely believe this, that they have a true grasp of reality and others don't. And it's not based on much. Require members to internalize the group's doctrine as truth. Number 2, instill black and white thinking. And yes, for most of the rank and file members of the Mormon Church, they definitely have black and white thinking. Require members to internalize the group's doctrine as truth. Number 3, decide between good versus evil. And yes, all you have to do is talk to the leaders of the church, and they will definitely tell you a big long list of what is good and a big long list of what is evil. Require members to internalize the group's doctrine as truth. Number 4, organize people into us versus them, the insiders versus the outsiders. And yeah, they definitely do this, especially the Mormons living in Utah. They feel like they're living in Zion, and people outside of Utah are not. And I see this in my own family. I've seen it within myself, that you're just a little leery of people outside of Utah or people that aren't Mormon. You feel like maybe they're not following God's plan or God's commandments, and they're committing evil and sin, like having a beer and having some coffee. Number 5, change the person's name and identity. This is kind of an interesting one because when you go through the temple, you do receive a new name. It's more of like your heavenly name, I guess. Mine was Solomon. But I never used that name in day-to-day life. It didn't really affect my identity. It had to do more with my temple identity, I guess, or my celestial identity. However, if you are a convert to the church, you will definitely have a change in identity from your pre-Mormon self to your Mormon self. A lot of that, I think, is going to be built up with guilt and shame for the new identity. So it's not a good thing. But overall, I would say no on this one. Number 6, use of loaded language and clichés which constrict knowledge, stop critical thoughts, and reduce complexities into platitudinous buzzwords. Yeah, there's all kinds of these in the Mormon Church. There's all kinds of clichés and platitudes. You'll hear them all the time, and part of it is the context. You'll hear different ones when you're on your mission, different ones when you're at BYU, different ones when you're in the temple, different ones when you're at church, but they definitely do this. Number 7, encourage only good and proper thoughts. Yeah, they definitely do this. There's scriptures in the Book of Mormon that say you need to do this. And they even tell homosexuals that they can stop their homosexual thinking and start thinking like a heterosexual, which is ridiculous, but yeah, they do this. Number 8, hypnotic techniques are used to alter mental states, undermine critical thinking, and even to age regress the member. And you don't hear this about this too much in the Mormon Church. If you watch this guy named Osho, he's supposed to be an enlightened master. He'll speak with this kind of wispy, lispy kind of thing in a slow and wispy kind of a way. It's a hypnotic technique that he uses and other cult leaders will use, but you don't see this in Mormonism. Number 9, memories are manipulated and false memories are created. Now, I don't think the Mormons do this. However, if you're a Mormon and you've received a severe trauma, this can just be a natural process where you push it back and you kind of forget about it. And some say there's this Mormon cult that does satanic rituals and then their memories are forgotten, but that's a controversial topic. Teaching thought-stopping techniques which shut down reality testing by stopping negative thoughts and allowing only positive thoughts, including, and this is number 10 for the thought section, denial, rationalization, justification, wishful thinking. I think this just happens kind of naturally when they go out onto the World Wide Web, find something controversial, they start to doubt about it. The church has taught them one thing their whole life. They start seeing some different reality on the web and stuff that is actually true. They go into denial, rationalization, and they have to deal with their cognitive dissonance. But yeah, they do this. Okay, teaching thought-stopping techniques, again, which shut down reality testing by stopping negative thoughts and allowing only positive thoughts, including, and this is number 11 in the thought section, chanting. So chanting like a Buddhist monk. There has been a little bit of this in the Mormon temple. I think some of it they've taken out. But in general, you don't have a lot of chanting in Mormonism. Okay, more thought-stopping techniques which shut down reality testing by stopping negative thoughts and allowing only positive thoughts, including number 12, meditation. So this is something you don't see in Mormonism very much. Some of the Mormons might go off and do it if they're reading other kinds of books other than Mormon and maybe reading some Eastern religious books, but in general, no. Okay, teaching thought-stopping techniques which shut down reality testing by stopping negative thoughts and allowing only positive thoughts, including number 13, prayer. So this is a big one in the Mormon Church, and actually when you are having doubts, it's one of the main things that your leader will tell you to do. They'll just tell you to read your scriptures and to pray about it. So they do actively teach this as a thought-stopping technique. They may not even know that that's what it is. But when you're having doubts, just sit down and pray to your Heavenly Father, and you can figure out your doubts. And this is actually how they verify that the Book of Mormon is true. They say a prayer and try to get an answer, and then that answer comes back and they say, oh yeah, the Book of Mormon is true, when really we know it's not. So yeah, they do this. Okay, teaching more thought-stopping techniques which shut down reality testing by stopping negative thoughts and allowing only positive thoughts. So we're shutting down the reality testing, which Mormons are good at, and that's why they stay in the cult. Number 14, speaking in tongues. Now, they did do this a little bit in the early days of the church. However, at some point, it got weeded out, and they haven't done it for a long time, as far as I know. Teaching thought-stopping techniques, which shut down reality testing by stopping negative thoughts and allowing only positive thoughts, including number 15, singing or humming. And they do a lot of singing and a lot of hymns in the Mormon Church. And I could see Mormon members doing this when they're having doubts. Just sing in their mind or sing out loud a faith-promoting song or hymn to kind of shut down the negative thoughts and to think about the good things about the church, all the good things they do. So yeah, I'd say yes on this. Number 16, rejection of rational analysis, rejection of critical thinking, and rejection of constructive criticism. Yeah, you don't see a whole lot of this in the Mormon Church. The rational analysis or critical thinking skills, they don't really teach it that well in the church, if at all. They teach you to read the scriptures, which you've read a million times, and just to simply pray, and then Heavenly Father will reveal the truth to you. So when really logic, critical thinking, and science should really come in and show them the way. Okay, number 17, forbid critical questions about leaders, doctrine, or policies. Now, it's not forbidden in the church. Let's say you're at church and you bring up one of these kind of critical questions. You're just going to be ignored, or the question will be brushed off, or they'll quickly change the question, or they'll give you a pat propaganda answer. It's really not encouraged. And there was an apostle named Dallin H. Oaks who actually said that it's wrong to criticize leaders of the church, even if the criticism is true. So that gives you an idea of where they stand. They are really taught to obey their leaders, that their leaders know what's going on, they know what's best for the church, they know what's best for you, and they know what's best for the world, when really their track record stinks. Okay, number 18, labeling alternative belief systems as illegitimate, evil, or not useful. There was an apostle, Bruce R. McConkie, that did quite a bit of this regarding the Catholic Church. The church kind of got away from that. But it's just kind of inherent in the church, because in their scripture, the Doctrine and Covenants, they say that they are the only true church. So it's not a big leap that once you believe that you're the only true church, that other belief systems are just at the bare minimum not useful, and that the Mormons have more truth than anybody. So it's just kind of an outgrowth of their belief that they're the only true church. Okay, so for thought control, I had 12 yes responses and 6 no responses. Okay, now we're going to the E part of the BITE model, emotional control. And there are 24 main ways a cult can control your emotions. Number 1, manipulate and narrow the range of feelings. Some emotions and or needs are deemed as evil, wrong, or selfish. So yeah, things like anger and pride, whatever is mentioned as an evil emotion in the Bible or the Book of Mormon, the Mormons are going to feel like it's evil, wrong, or selfish. So yeah, they do this. Number 2, teach emotion-stopping techniques to block feelings of homesickness, anger, or doubt. Now, as far as I know, they don't do this. Most Mormons live in their community, so they don't have homesickness. As far as anger and doubt, they teach other ways that really aren't emotion-stopping techniques. So no. Number 3, make the person feel that problems are always their own fault, never the leader's or the group's fault. Yeah, you will very rarely hear a Mormon leader apologize or say that they're at fault or that they did something wrong, because the leaders are close to infallible. So yeah, if there is something wrong with you, it kind of goes back to you not praying enough, you not studying the scriptures enough, you not following the leaders enough, whatever. Yeah, so yes. Okay, promote feelings of guilt or unworthiness, such as number 4, identity guilt. So there is a lot of guilt in the Mormon Church. Some of this is just original sin from Adam that we've kind of inherited. There's an identity right there that's unworthy that they believe in. Creating an identity based on guilt and shame, that's very common in the Mormon Church, feelings of not being good enough. So I'd say yes on this. Promoting feelings of guilt or unworthiness, such as number 5, you are not living up to your potential. So there's so many rules and regulations in the Mormon Church, and they have this path to perfection. I mean, they talk about perfection, and so nobody really lives up to it. And there's so many rules that nobody's able to keep all the rules perfectly. So this just automatically goes to you are not living up to your potential because nobody's perfect. Okay, promoting feelings of guilt or unworthiness, such as number 6, your family is deficient. So there is a lot of rules for the family. There's family prayer, there's family scripture reading, there's family home evening, and very few Mormon families are able to do these things perfectly. So yeah, they automatically think that their family is deficient because they don't keep these things perfectly. Okay, promoting feelings of guilt or unworthiness, such as number 7, your past is suspect. So original sin from Adam, yeah, all of our past is suspect, according to the Mormon Church and according to people who believe in the Bible, original sin. There is also the thing when you're an investigator and you become a convert to the church, you may think that your past is suspect, your former way of life is suspect, all the sins you used to do are suspect. When you were drinking alcohol, when you were looking at porn, when you were drinking coffee, so yes. Promoting feelings of guilt or unworthiness, such as number 8, your affiliations are unwise. So there is this thing in the church about affiliations. You're not really supposed to date non-members. You're not really supposed to hang out with people who do things that you don't do, like drink alcohol or smoke cigarettes. So yeah, you have to be careful of your affiliations. And if you're a convert to the church, your past affiliations may corrupt you, may cause you to become sinful. So I'm going to say yes on this. Promoting feelings of guilt or unworthiness, such as number 9, your thoughts. So let's go through these one by one. Yeah, your thoughts are somewhat irrelevant or selfish because you're just taught to read the scriptures. You're taught to follow and obey the leaders. So your thoughts should match up with what the leaders say, and they should match up with what the scriptures say. Now, feelings is a little bit different. They do encourage you to have feelings. So you can pray about the Book of Mormon, and then you get this ooey-gooey feeling that it's true. So they do teach you to have feelings, but they teach you that your feelings will match up with what they tell you they will match up to. And then that you will get this feeling that the Book of Mormon is true. So some feelings are there, but they kind of lack individual feelings. And then your own actions, there's so many rules and regulations that, yeah, you have to get your actions in line with all the rules and regulations. So, yeah, those become irrelevant and selfish. Okay, number 10, and this is still on the promote feelings of guilt or unworthiness. And this is huge in the Mormon Church. They promote so much feelings of guilt, so much feelings of unworthiness, never being good enough, never being able to be perfect. So yeah, all these are just right on point for the Mormon Church, but some of these actually are not. So number 10 is social guilt. For instance, people are dying of starvation. So Mormons don't really have social guilt. They don't really get involved that much in activism. They don't really think about the world. What does the world need? How are we going to solve poverty? How are we going to solve starvation and these kinds of issues? These things aren't brought up. And it's weird that they're not, because it's like they don't care about the world in the broader sense, like, say, the Jewish people do, or people in the Unitarian Church that are so involved in activism. So this is a no. Okay, promoting feelings of guilt or unworthiness, such as number 11, historical guilt. For instance, the fact that the United States dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima. Now, it is interesting because the Mormons just aren't engaged in activism. they're just not engaged in thinking about the world and about world politics and things like dropping a bomb on Hiroshima. So there isn't this historical guilt. This kind of stuff is just not talked about. They don't talk about the history of the world. They don't talk about fixing poverty or how are we going to solve these big issues like energy. So this is a no, and it is interesting because this kind of stuff's just not brought up. Okay, instilling fear, such as the fear of thinking independently, and this is number 12 on the emotional list. The fear of thinking independently. And they definitely have this. There's a quote in the church that says, once the leaders have spoken, the thinking has been done. And you see this orange fish kind of swimming the other way. So yeah, you're not encouraged to think independently. You're encouraged to obey the leaders. Instilling fear, such as fear of the outside world. This is number 13. Fear of the outside world. There is this. They have this feeling that they are in Zion, that they have their church community, that they're safe in their church, that they're safe in their temple, and this fear of going into the outside world that's non-Mormon, that doesn't live as they do, that doesn't keep the same standards, that is sinful and doesn't keep all of God's commandments. So they have this fear of the outside world. Okay, instilling fear such as the fear of enemies, number 14. So enemies. So what comes to my mind here is anti-Mormons who write anti-Mormon literature, that's supposedly anti-Mormon literature, but usually has a lot of facts, or oftentimes has a lot of facts, such as Gerald and Sandra Tanner. These become enemies to the church. And so when you're in the Mormon Church and you pick up Mormonism, Shadow or Reality by the Tanners, or you go into their little bookshop, you have this fear, this psychological fear that they're corrupt and evil and possessed by Satan and all this stuff, and that they really are an enemy. So yeah, they have this. Instilling fear, such as the fear of losing one's salvation, number 15. And yeah, they, in their own Doctrine and Covenants, they say they are the only true church. And they say that they have the only priesthood on the earth to act in God's name, to do his ordinances. And they say they have the only true temple ceremony, which one does need and is required to obtain salvation, at least in the highest degree of glory, which is the celestial kingdom. So yeah, if you don't have these things, you will lose your salvation. And this is really the product of the church. This is what they sell. And if anybody comes up and says this is not what they're selling, and they start to teach, so like some of these apologists do, that they're not really selling salvation anymore, they're just selling a feel-good community, it's going to cause a ton of people to leave the church. Instilling fear, such as the fear of, number 16, leaving or being shunned by the group. And yes, if you're Mormon and you do leave, you should fear being shunned by the group, because they do it. And they will automatically have a negative idea of why you left. You sinned. You drank alcohol. You looked at pornography. You're now dark now. You're now evil now. So that relationship will be strained. And especially if you try to talk about why you're leaving too much, it will be strained and you will be shunned. And it'll be a hard time to reconcile with your family. So yes, they do. Instilling fear. So yeah, there's a lot of fear in the church. It's one of their main motivating forces. Fear, guilt, and shame. And you can get a lot of people to do a lot of things just through those three things: fear, guilt, and shame. So the fear, such as the fear of others' disapproval, number 17. So yeah, you don't want your parents to disapprove of you. You don't want your friends to disapprove of you. You don't want your bishop and your local leaders and the 12 apostles and the prophet to disapprove of you. So you want to just follow all the rules and be a good little Mormon person, because yeah, they will disapprove of you. Okay, number 18, extremes of emotional highs and lows. Love bombing and praise one moment, and then declaring you a horrible sinner the next moment. So if you're a convert, yeah, you kind of get love bombed. You come to church and everybody will show interest in you and ask you questions, and try to get you in the church, or if there's an investigator and you're meeting with the missionaries and you get their friends, some of the Mormons, to come over, and you kind of love bomb them, try to get them into the church. But then you try to get them to follow all the rules and regulations of the church after they join. And so, if they don't pay their tithing, if they can't give up their coffee, or they're having a beer once in a while, then they start feeling like a horrible sinner. So yes. Okay, number 19, ritualistic and sometimes public confession of sins. In the Mormon Church, this is a one-on-one thing, self-regulating thing, self-judging thing. But you know what the rules are, and you know what all the commandments are. So you go in to your bishop, and it's a one-on-one thing, or your stake president. There isn't this ritualistic thing or public confession of sins, which could bring shame on you. All right, phobia indoctrination, inculcating irrational fears about leaving the group or questioning the leader's authority. Number 20, no happiness or fulfillment possible outside of the group. So they do have this. It's probably best illustrated by the way they talk about children. So if you leave the church and you have children, which most Mormons do, your Mormon friends and your Mormon leaders will say, well, how are you going to possibly raise those kids? How are you going to do it without the church, without all the rules and regulations and all the programs of the church? You just can't raise happy children outside of the church. That's the idea, which is a load of BS, but yeah, they have this. Okay, phobia indoctrination, inculcating irrational fears about leaving the group or questioning the leader's authority. 21, terrible consequences if you leave. Hell, demon possession, incurable diseases, accidents, suicide, insanity, 10,000 reincarnations, etc. Oh no. So it's not hell for Mormons. It's just not going into the celestial kingdom, the highest kingdom. But you really do want to try to get there, because it is definitely the best place. And I'm going to do a video about salvation in the celestial kingdom to describe what that's like, what they think it's like. Demon possession, not really, although, the devil will probably get you. He'll start influencing you. Incurable diseases, maybe. An accident, maybe. There is this idea that if you follow God's commands, good things will happen. If you pay your tithing, good things will happen. If you leave the church, bad things will happen. If you don't live God's commandments, bad things will happen. Even if it's the most simplest of things, like having some tea with caffeine. So yeah, they do this. Okay, phobia indoctrination, inculcating irrational fears about leaving the group or questioning the leader's authority. Yeah, it's not good to question the leader's authority in the Mormon Church. Not good, not good. You should just obey. 22, shunning of those who leave, fear of being rejected by friends, peers, and family. We've already talked about this. They do it. And they are likely to think that you are a sinner and that you left for some bad or nefarious reason. So, yeah, and we've talked about this, so yes. Phobia indoctrination, inculcating irrational fears about leaving the group or questioning the leader's authority. 23, there's never a legitimate reason to leave. Those who leave are weak, undisciplined, unspiritual, worldly, brainwashed by family or counselor, or seduced by money, sex, or rock and roll. Yes, yes, yes. Okay, phobia indoctrination, inculcating irrational fears about leaving the group or questioning the leader's authority. 24, threats of harm to ex-member and family. So I think this is not just emotional harm, although it could be. I think it's physical harm. That's the way I'm interpreting it. They don't really go that far to say, oh yeah, we're going to inflict physical harm, but there is a lot of emotional harm done. So for emotional control, I had 20 yes responses and 4 no responses, which makes the church look pretty bad. Okay, so it's interesting, this picture and the first picture that I started off the video with, because it looks really similar to the clothing that they wear in the temple. And it's like the epitome of what a cult member looks like, this kind of white clothing and Mormon temple clothing. And if you want to see Mormon temple ceremony, go watch some of New Name Noah's videos. He's got them all recorded. So out of 79 total responses, Mormonism had 57 yes responses and 22 no responses. And this is why Steven Hassan and other cult experts classified the Mormon Church as a cult. So yeah, Steven Hassan knows about the Mormon Church. He's dealt with Mormons. He's tried to get Mormons out of the church. He's had interventions. He knows about many of these categories and how Mormons fall into them. A lot of other cult experts know the same things, and that they know that the Mormon Church is a cult. I know it's controversial for Mormons, but yes, it definitely is a cult for all you possible investigators and possible converts. You should know.